The envelope had a faint smell of cedar and dust, like it had been hiding in the back of a drawer for years. I only realized it wasn't part of the official documents when I felt the uneven edge under my thumb, one sheet folded smaller, tucked between the typed pages of the will. My grandfather's lawyer hadn't noticed. Or maybe he had, and thought it best to leave it alone. It wasn't heavy, just deliberate, the kind of paper that carried a man's conscience. And on that hidden page, in a shaky line of black ink, my father's name had been crossed out. It's strange how you can lose someone twice, once to death and again to truth. I grew up thinking my grandfather, Walter Reed, was the kind of man small towns quietly worship. He ran the feed store, paid for the high school football uniforms every year, and had that old-fashioned politeness that made people call him sir even when they didn't have to. He died the summer I turned 30. The funeral was held on the hill behind the Methodist Church in St. Helene, Tennessee, under a heat that made black suits feel like punishment. My father, James, stood beside me, eyes hidden behind the same aviators he'd worn since the 80s. He didn't cry. I didn't expect him to. What I didn't know then was that my grandfather's death was just the start, that the real unraveling began in that lawyer's office 2 weeks later, when a name disappeared from a line it was supposed to own. It was a Monday, late morning. I remember because the courthouse clock struck 11 as I parked by the square. The whole town had that slow post-funeral hangover, polite condolences replaced by gossip, casseroles gone cold. The lawyer, Mr. Cormack, looked like a man halfway retired. Suspenders, nicotine fingers, and a voice that rasped when he said my name. "Evan Reed," he said, flipping through the thick envelope. "You're executor now, correct?" I nodded. I didn't feel like an executor of anything, just the guy who happened to live closest. My father had moved to Memphis years ago, and we hadn't spoken much since my mother died. Cormac spread the will out on the desk, the paper whispering against the oak surface. "Your grandfather was thorough," he said. "Property divisions, trust details, the store, all outlined here." My father leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "Let's just get to the part that matters." Cormac's eyes flicked between us. "You'll each receive a copy. The store's been sold to the town cooperative. The house goes to you, Evan." My father shifted. "And what about me?" Cormac's tone softened. "Your father left you personal items, keepsakes." My dad's jaw clenched. "Keepsakes," he said flatly, like the word itself was an insult. I didn't understand the weight of that moment until later, until I found the hidden page. That night, I stayed at the old house alone. The place still smelled like Grandpa's aftershave, a mix of pine and tobacco. Boxes lined the hallway, filled with tools, ledgers, and photographs that didn't make sense anymore. I sat at his desk, the one facing the window that overlooked the barn. The will lay in front of me, still half folded. I wasn't even looking for anything, just reading out of guilt or habit. Then I saw it, a seam where the last page felt thicker than it should have. My thumb caught the edge, and a second sheet slipped out, slightly yellowed, folded twice. It wasn't typed. It was handwritten. And in my grandfather's blocky penmanship, a single sentence sat near the top. "If this page is found, let it be known the name of James Reed is to be removed from this will for reasons I can no longer keep silent." Below that, my father's name had been printed, James Walter Reed, and then crossed out in a single, dark, deliberate stroke. No explanation, no date, just his initials beside it, W.R. I didn't sleep that night. I kept reading that line until the ink blurred. Reasons I can no longer keep silent. I thought about calling my father. Then I thought about burning the page, but I didn't do either. Instead, I put the paper back in the envelope and locked it in the desk drawer. The next morning, I drove into town and found the one person who might know something. Ruth Walker, the clerk who'd worked for my grandfather for 30 years at the feed store. The bell above the door jingled like it always did. The store smelled like grain and molasses. Ruth was behind the counter, sorting invoices with her usual sharp precision. She looked up, surprised. "Evan Reed," she said, squinting. "Haven't seen you in a while. I'm sorry about Walter." "Thanks," I said quietly. "I just had a question about some paperwork he left." Her hands froze mid-stack. "Paperwork?" "Yeah. Something about the will." Her eyes softened, but there was a flicker. That brief, guilty kind people get when they already know what you're about to say. "What kind of something?" "A page that wasn't supposed to be there." The silence stretched. Ruth looked down, then back at me. "He told me he'd write a letter someday," she said slowly. "Said it was for the truth, not for revenge. I didn't think he actually did." My pulse quickened. "What truth?" She sighed, glancing toward the back office. "Evan, your father and your grandfather stopped speaking years ago. I'm guessing he didn't tell you why." "He said it was about the store," I replied. She shook her head. "It wasn't about the store. It was about your grandmother." That sentence felt like a floorboard giving way under my feet. My grandmother Ellen had died before I was born. My father rarely mentioned her, just said she'd been delicate, which I learned later meant depressed. The family version of the story was clean. She died in her sleep. But as Ruth started talking, I realized that story had more holes than memory. "She left a note," Ruth said, voice trembling a little. "The night before she passed. Walter found it, and he never showed it to anyone. But he told me once, 'Your father wasn't in it.'" I frowned. "Wasn't in it?" "She wrote about you, about Walter, about the farm, but not him. He'd already left by then, hadn't he? He was 19, always running off with that girl from town." Her voice trailed off, but I heard the implication. "Are you saying my father wasn't—" "I'm not saying anything," Ruth cut in. "Just maybe your grandfather found something he couldn't forgive." I left the store in a daze. The afternoon sun felt cruelly bright. My father's name, crossed out in black ink, burned behind my eyes. I drove past the cemetery without meaning to, and saw the fresh flowers still wilting on my grandfather's grave. I pulled over and sat there for a while, window down, wind full of cicadas. The question that kept circling in my head wasn't why Grandpa did it, it was why now. If he'd wanted to cut my father out, he could have done it years ago. Why hide the page? Why make sure I'd find it after he was gone? It felt like a message meant to outlive him. That night, I called my father. He didn't pick up. I tried again. Straight to voicemail. I almost left it alone. But something about that line, "Reasons I can no longer keep silent," wouldn't let me. The next morning, I drove to Memphis. His house was a 2-story brick in a quiet subdivision. He'd remarried a woman named Janet a few years ago. She answered the door in a robe, mascara half done. "Oh," she said, blinking. "Evan, you didn't call. Is my dad home?" She hesitated. "He's out back." I walked through the living room. Same old recliner, same faint smell of motor oil and bourbon. He was sitting by the pool, shirt off, sunglasses on, flipping through a newspaper like it was any other day. I set the envelope on the table beside him. "What's that?" he asked without looking up. "Grandpa's will." He snorted. "Already got my copy." "There's more to it," I said quietly. "A page that wasn't supposed to be there." That got his attention. He folded the paper, leaned back, and stared at me. "What page?" I slid it across. "This one." He unfolded it slowly. His hand trembled. Not much, but enough for me to see. When his eyes hit the crossed out line, his face drained of color. He didn't speak for a long time. Then, in a voice that didn't sound like his, he said, He finally did it. What does that mean, Erson? I asked. My father looked up, jaw tightening. It means your grandfather was a coward. Dad, he stood, gripping the back of the chair. He didn't have the guts to face what he did, so he rewrote history, like always. What did he do? He laughed once, bitter, humorless. You wouldn't believe me if I told you. Try me. He looked at me for a long moment, something calculating in his eyes. Then he said, You ever wonder why your grandmother died so young? The words hit like a stone. I thought it was her heart. It wasn't. Then what? She found out, he said flatly, about him, about the baby. My breath caught. What baby? He smiled, a slow, pained twist of his mouth. The one that wasn't hers. The world seemed to tilt. My grandfather, the man who taught me to fish, who prayed before every meal, had another child? I sat down, trying to make sense of it. My father lit a cigarette, hands shaking just enough for the flame to flicker twice. He had an affair, he said, back when I was a kid. She was one of the clerks from the store. My mother found out, and she couldn't handle it. He blamed me, said I told her, said I ruined everything. His voice cracked, just slightly. He never forgave me for that. So he crossed you out of the will, I said. He nodded. Guess even the grave wasn't far enough for his grudge. I didn't know what to believe. Part of me wanted to defend my grandfather, to say the man I knew couldn't have done that. But another part, the quieter, older part, remembered the coldness in the house whenever my father was mentioned. The silence that followed his name. I left without saying much else. The drive home felt endless. The fields blurred into shades of green and gold, the road humming like static. By the time I reached the old farmhouse, dusk had settled in. I poured a glass of whiskey and sat at the desk again, staring at the page. If my father was telling the truth, my grandfather had erased him not out of justice, but guilt. But something didn't fit. Grandpa's words weren't angry. They were burdened, like he'd held on to something he didn't want to. I needed proof. So I did something I probably shouldn't have. I went into the attic. The attic had been sealed for years, dust thick enough to write names in. I found a chest near the back, one I'd never opened before. The lock was rusted, but the hinge gave with a single pull. Inside, letters, dozens of them. Some addressed to my grandmother, some to no one at all, and near the bottom, a small envelope labeled Ruth. The same Ruth Walker who'd worked at the store. My pulse quickened. I opened it carefully. Inside was a single sheet, folded over 3 times. My grandfather's handwriting again. Ruth, if anything happens to me, please see that Evan finds the truth. I couldn't tell him myself. What James did to Ellen cannot stay buried. I froze. That line, what James did to Ellen, not what I did. It flipped everything. The attic air felt colder suddenly. My hands shook as I held the note. If this was true, my father had lied. Again. And if Grandpa had hidden that page in the will for me, maybe it wasn't revenge. Maybe it was warning. I sat there until my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You shouldn't have gone digging, Evan. I stared at it, heart pounding. No name, no signature, just a threat wrapped in silence. And somewhere, deep down, I knew. This wasn't over. The message stayed on my screen all night. You shouldn't have gone digging, Evan. No emoji, no punctuation, just the kind of quiet menace that comes from someone who knows you well enough to use your first name. I didn't reply. I didn't even move. I just sat there in the dim attic, the phone's light cutting a rectangle through the dust. By the time the sun came up, my body felt hollow, like I'd stayed awake in someone else's skin. I made coffee I didn't drink and stared at the yard, where my grandfather's old hound used to sleep in the shade. When I finally picked up the phone again, the message had been deleted. That morning, I drove back to town. Not to the feed store. Ruth wouldn't have texted me that. I went to the courthouse. The clerk there, Martha Collins, had been filing land records since before I was born. "Morning," she said, looking up from her computer. "Back again so soon?" I forced a smile. "Looking for something from the archives." "Property records?" "Family stuff. My grandfather's estate, Walter Reed." She squinted, thinking. "That name's been through this office plenty. What exactly you hunting for?" "Anything notarized in his hand after 2008, especially changes to his will." Her fingers tapped the keyboard. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead like bees in a jar. After a minute, she said, "There's one addendum, dated May 2014, witnessed but not filed." "Not filed?" She shrugged. "Means he had it notarized, then took it back. Sometimes people change their minds." "Can I see it?" "Not supposed to release without executor clearance. I am the executor." She blinked, then smiled. "Well, then I guess we're square." She slid a manila folder across the counter. The paper inside had a faint watermark and my grandfather's slanted handwriting in the margin. And there it was, my father's name again, but not crossed out this time, circled, and next to it, in that same uneven pen, "Until he tells the truth, he will not inherit." I took a photo with my phone, thanked her, and stepped outside. The air was heavy, rain in the distance. Across the square, the diner sign flickered, "Eat Here," in red neon. I crossed the street and sat in a booth by the window. I kept reading that line, "Until he tells the truth." Not until he apologizes, not until he pays me back. Until he tells the truth. Which meant there was still something I didn't know. I texted Ruth, "Can we talk again?" No reply. So I drove back to her house, a small blue cottage behind the Methodist church. Her car was in the driveway. The porch light was still on. When I knocked, no one answered. The door was unlocked. I shouldn't have gone in, but I did. The house was quiet, except for the tick of a clock. A kettle sat cold on the stove, a cup on the counter, half full, and on the kitchen table, another envelope. My name written in shaky cursive. I opened it with trembling fingers. "Evan, I don't know what your father told you, but you need to see the police report from 1984. Ask for Officer D. Miller. It's still in evidence. Don't trust James. Ruth." There was a single Polaroid folded inside, faded and blurry, but you could still make out faces. My grandfather, my grandmother, and a woman I didn't recognize, a young brunette holding a baby. The date scrawled on the bottom said June 1984, the year my grandmother died. I felt a coldness crawl up my spine. Outside, a car door slammed. I looked through the window. A dark sedan idling by the curb. The driver stayed inside. Couldn't see the face through the glare. I pocketed the note, left the house, and got in my truck. By the time I pulled out of the driveway, the sedan's engine revved and followed. For 10 minutes, we wound through the back roads. The old logging route that cut through the woods. I didn't want to believe it was tailing me, but every turn I made, it made too. Finally, I braked hard near the bridge over Henson Creek. The truck fishtailed a little on the gravel. The sedan stopped about 30 yards behind me. I stepped out. "Who are you?" I shouted. No answer. The window rolled down halfway. A man's voice called back, low, almost bored. "Go home, Evan. You're digging where you shouldn't." I couldn't see his face. Just a wrist. Gold watch, faint scar near the thumb. Then the car reversed, turned, and disappeared down the road. I didn't go home. I went straight to the police station. The clerk at the front desk was a young guy, maybe 25. His badge said Simpson. Officer Miller still around? I asked. He shook his head. Retired 10 years ago. Why? I need a report from 84. Reed family. My grandmother's death. He frowned. We usually don't release old reports without cause. There's cause. I slid Ruth's note across the counter. She told me to ask. He read it, eyebrows rising. Ruth Walker. She's been calling here for weeks. Said she had proof of something about that case. Chief told her to stop harassing the department. I swallowed hard. Did she say what she found? He shook his head. No, just that the wrong person got blamed. Blamed for what? Your grandmother's death. He disappeared into the back room, came out with a dusty folder. Here's what's left. Half the files got lost in the flood of '98. Inside was the original incident report. Case number 84276. Deceased, Ellen Reed. Cause of death, asphyxiation by carbon monoxide. But someone had written something faintly in pencil across the margin. I angled it toward the light. Suspect denied access to vehicle. Husband verified alibi. Suspect. I turned the page. Neighbor, R. Walker, reported hearing argument earlier that night. Victim found in garage with engine running. Evidence inconclusive. The word suicide had been underlined twice, then crossed out. I sat there for a long time, the paper shaking in my hands. The next page was a single photograph. The same Polaroid I'd seen in Ruth's letter, except clearer. The woman beside my grandmother wasn't some stranger. It was Ruth. And the baby in her arms wasn't hers. It was me. I had to step outside. The air felt like syrup, too thick to breathe. If Ruth had been holding me in that photo, then she'd known me since birth. And if that was true, maybe she wasn't just Grandpa's clerk. Maybe she was something more. I drove back to the old farmhouse, every thought colliding in my head. My grandfather's line, until he tells the truth. Ruth's note, don't trust James. And my father's story about an affair. They couldn't all be true. Somewhere in those contradictions was the real reason my grandfather crossed out his son's name. That night, I couldn't sit still. I kept pacing between the living room and the desk where the will still lay open. The floor creaked in the same spots it had when I was a kid, sneaking down for cookies. The clock ticked louder than I remembered. Around midnight, I opened the drawer again and took out the hidden page. I ran my fingers over the ink, half expecting to feel heat still trapped in it. Then I noticed something I hadn't before. Faint impressions on the back of the page, like someone had written a note on top of it once, hard enough to leave an imprint. I held it under the desk lamp. The letters slowly emerged under the light. Ruth, keep the second letter safe. He'll come for it. There was a knock at the door. 3 quick taps. I froze. When I opened it, there was no one there. Just a plain brown envelope on the porch. No stamp, no writing. Inside was a copy of the same police report I'd seen earlier, except this one had an extra page. It was a typed transcript of a witness interview dated 2 days after Ellen Reed's death. Officer, did you see who entered the garage that night? Witness, Ruth Walker. Yes. James Reed. Around 10 p.m. Officer, you're sure it wasn't Walter Reed? Ruth, I'm sure. Walter was inside with the baby. My stomach dropped. My father was the last person to see my grandmother alive. I didn't sleep. Every sound felt amplified. The ticking, the wind against the window, even the pipes murmuring under the floorboards. At dawn, I called my father again. He answered this time. Evan? His voice was hoarse. I know, I said quietly. About Grandma. There was a long pause. Who told you? Does it matter? He exhaled, the sound heavy. She was sick. She wanted to die. I tried to stop her. She was in the garage. I was the one who found her. That's not what the report says. His tone changed, sharper. You've been reading things that don't concern you. It concerns me if my grandfather hid it for 30 years. You think you know what happened? His voice cracked, anger bleeding through. You don't. You never will. Then tell me. He hung up. I sat there staring at the phone, hand trembling. Outside, rain started, slow at first, then hard, and under the sound of it, something else. A soft hum. A car engine. I looked through the window. Same dark sedan, parked at the end of the drive, headlights off, waiting. I didn't call the police. I just grabbed my jacket, the letters, and slipped out the back. The field behind the house led to the old barn, where Grandpa kept his tools. Inside, the air smelled of rust and hay. I hid behind the stack of crates and listened. The front door creaked open in the distance, footsteps on wood, a slow, deliberate, then a voice. My father's. Evan, we need to talk. The beam of a flashlight cut through the darkness. I stayed quiet, barely breathing. He stopped near the desk, looking around. You don't understand what you're doing, he said, his voice low, almost pleading. It's not what you think. He turned toward the drawer, the one where the will had been. He opened it, found it empty, and slammed it shut. Damn it! The sound echoed through the barn. Then he said softer, You think you're saving him. You're not. You're just digging up ghosts. The flashlight turned off. Silence. When I finally stepped out, the sedan was gone. By morning, I'd made up my mind. If I wanted answers, I had to find the second letter my grandfather mentioned, the one Ruth had supposedly kept safe. The only place that made sense was her old office at the feed store, the one that had been locked since she retired. I waited until evening when the co-op closed and parked in the alley. The back door still had the same loose latch I used to slip through as a kid. The air inside was stale, papers yellowed, shelves dusty. In the bottom drawer of her old filing cabinet, I found a ledger wrapped in brown twine. Inside the cover was a smaller envelope labeled, For Evan, when the truth finds him. My hands shook as I opened it. It was a letter from my grandfather. Evan, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and the lies are too heavy to carry further. Your father isn't the man he pretends to be. The night your grandmother died, he came to the house drunk. She'd found out he'd taken money from the store, forged my name on loan papers. When she threatened to go to the sheriff, he followed her to the garage. She never woke up. I couldn't prove it, and Ruth begged me not to destroy what was left of him for your sake. But I couldn't forgive him either. That's why I left the will unfinished. So you'd find this, not him. You deserve the truth. Walter. I read it 3 times, each slower than the last. Every piece suddenly fit. The hidden page, the warning, the threat. My father hadn't been cut out for betrayal of property. He'd been cut out for murder. And somehow, he'd known I was getting close. Because just as I finished reading, I heard it again. Tires crunching on gravel outside. Then the front door handle turning, and his voice, quiet, cold. Evan, put the letter down. The sound of his voice stopped me cold. It wasn't loud, not angry, just quiet in that way that means there's nothing left to argue about. The kind of quiet you hear right before something irreversible happens. I froze, the letter still in my hand. Evan, he said again, closer this time, don't make me ask twice. I could hear his shoes on the old wood floor, slow, deliberate. Every step matched my heartbeat. I didn't dare breathe. The barn door creaked wider, letting in a line of pale evening light that sliced across the dust. His silhouette filled it, tall, steady, familiar. My father. But in that moment, I didn't see the man who taught me to ride a bike. I saw the one my grandfather had warned me about. He stepped inside, shutting the door behind him. The latch clicked like a lock on a confession. "Where's the letter?" I slipped it into my jacket pocket. "You don't need to see it." He smiled. Thin, humorless. "I think I do. Grandpa wrote it for me." "Then you've already made your choice." The way he said choice made my stomach turn. "Dad," I said carefully, "it doesn't have to go this way. Just tell me what happened. I'll listen." He shook his head. "You already decided I'm guilty. You're not denying it, because there's nothing to deny." He took a step closer, and for the first time, I saw the exhaustion in his face, the lines deeper than I remembered, the gray in his stubble, the kind of tired that comes from carrying something too long. "I didn't kill her, Evan," he said, "but I didn't save her either." He leaned against the workbench, staring at the floor. "That night, she was already in the garage when I got there. The car was running. I thought she was just trying to scare him. To scare me. I didn't know she meant it." He looked up. His eyes were wet. "I tried to pull her out, but she locked the damn door from inside. I broke the window too late. I still smell that exhaust sometimes." "Why didn't you tell the police, hon?" I asked. "Because he told me not to." "Grandpa?" He nodded. "He said it would destroy the family name. Said it was better to call it an accident. He told me to keep my mouth shut and leave town for a while. I did. And when I came back, he looked at me like I was a stranger." I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to. But the problem was, my grandfather's letter said otherwise. It mentioned the forged loan, the fight, the threat. "Why did she say you took money?" I asked. He rubbed his temples. "Because I did. I borrowed against the store to cover a debt. Thought I could pay it back before anyone noticed." "And she found out." He nodded. "She wasn't supposed to. She went through my papers." "So she confronted you." He didn't answer, just stared at the wall where a line of light crawled upward through the cracks in the wood. After a long silence, he said, "She said she'd go to the sheriff if I didn't tell him myself. I told her I would. I never did." The air between us was thick with ghosts. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the letter. "He knew, Dad. Grandpa knew everything." He didn't even look at it. "Of course he did. He was there." "What?" He straightened up slowly. "He followed me to the garage that night, watched from the kitchen window. He told the police he was asleep, but he wasn't. He saw me break the window. He saw me drag her out, and he still let them think I did it. Why? Because it was easier than blaming her for giving up." For a moment, the wind outside whistled through a crack in the siding. It sounded like a voice, distant, broken. I couldn't tell if he was telling the truth or rewriting it like every man in my family seemed to do. He stepped closer, eyes locked on mine. "Evan, that letter in your hand, it's not the truth. It's revenge. Walter couldn't forgive himself, so he wrote me as the villain. He wanted you to hate me the way he hated himself." He reached for the paper. I pulled back. "Don't," I said. "Give it to me." "No." His jaw tightened. "You think you're protecting him. You're just repeating him." "Repeating what?" "Blind loyalty." Before I could answer, a car pulled up outside. We both turned toward the sound, tires crunching on gravel, headlights cutting through the cracks. He looked at me. "Who else knows?" "No one." He nodded once slowly. "Then you need to go. Now." "What are you—" He grabbed my shoulder, firm. "Go out the back. Don't come back here tonight." "Dad." He looked at me, eyes full of something I hadn't seen since I was a kid. Fear. "Please." I slipped out the back door, heart pounding. As I reached the tree line, I heard another door open. The sedan again. Two voices, one low, one unfamiliar. Then a gunshot. I dropped flat against the ground. The sound echoed through the trees. My ears rang. My whole body shook. I crawled toward the truck, breath shallow, praying I wouldn't hear a second shot. When I finally made it to the road, the barn was quiet. Smoke curled up from one broken window, faint in the dark. I didn't go back. I drove straight to the sheriff's office. By the time I got there, the rain had started again. The same young officer, Simpson, looked up from the desk. "You okay?" he asked, seeing the mud on my jeans. "I need to report a shooting. My father's property off Mill Creek Road." He radioed something in fast. "Anyone hurt?" "I don't know." Within minutes, sirens filled the night. When we got there, the barn was half collapsed. The doors hung off their hinges. Inside, the smell of smoke and gunpowder stung the air. They found my father near the workbench, still breathing, shoulder grazed by the bullet. The shooter was gone. The sheriff, a heavy-set man with gray hair, looked over at me. "You the son?" "Yeah." He nodded toward the paramedics loading my father onto a stretcher. "He's lucky. Another inch and it'd be over." "Who shot him?" He shrugged. "We're working on it. You got any enemies, son?" I almost laughed. "Just family." At the hospital, my father wouldn't talk. He refused to name the shooter, refused to press charges. When I asked him who it was, he said only, "Someone finishing what your grandfather started." They kept him overnight. I sat in the hallway until dawn, staring at the fluorescent lights flickering above the vending machine. I didn't realize Ruth had been sitting across from me until she spoke. "You look like him, you know," she said softly. I blinked. "Ruth?" She nodded, frail, eyes red. "You shouldn't have come back here, Evan." "I could say the same to you." She smiled sadly. "I never really left. I was just waiting for the truth to find the right ears." She reached into her bag and handed me a small cassette tape, the kind you use in answering machines. "What's this?" I asked. "Your grandmother's voice. She recorded it the night before she died." I froze. "How did you, She left it at the store. Walter gave it to me to destroy. I couldn't." I turned it over in my hand. The label was faded but still legible. "Ellen, June 16th, 1984. "Why now?" I asked. "Because if your father doesn't tell the truth," she said, "you need to hear it from her." Back at the farmhouse, I found Grandpa's old tape player in the desk drawer. The buttons stuck a little, but it still worked. I slid the tape in. The spools turned. A faint hiss filled the room. Then a voice, fragile, trembling, unmistakably hers. "Walter, if you find this, I'm sorry. I tried to hold the family together, but I can't anymore. James is in trouble again. He forged your name on another loan. He says he'll fix it, but the men he owes are coming tomorrow. I can't live through another scandal. Not after what happened with the baby." My chest tightened. "Please forgive me. I love you. And tell Evan, tell him I tried." Then silence, and then, faintly, another sound. The door opening, footsteps, a man's voice, my father's. "Mom, what are you doing?" Then the recording cut off. I sat there for a long time, the tape still spinning, the sound of static filling the room like rain. When it finally clicked off, I realized something. The second voice wasn't angry. It was panicked. Whatever happened that night, it wasn't clean. It wasn't murder in the way stories make sense of it. It was something worse. An accident wrapped in guilt, rewritten until no one knew what was true anymore. But someone else had been there. Someone besides my father and grandmother. Because when I replayed it, slowing the volume just before the cut, I heard it. A second man's voice, deep, sharp, a whisper near the door. And it wasn't my grandfather. The next morning, Sheriff Halbrook called. "We found the shooter," he said. "Who?" He hesitated. You might want to sit down. Just tell me. Your uncle, David Reed. I blinked. I don't have an uncle. You do now, he said. Half-brother of your father, born 1984. The world tilted again. The other baby. The one my grandmother mentioned. The one that wasn't hers. According to the report, David had come forward after years in hiding. He'd been living under another name in Arkansas. When he heard Walter had died, he came back, claiming his share of the estate, saying the will was forged. When my father refused to meet him, things got violent. The sheriff said they'd found his prints on the shell casing and a motel key in his pocket. That night, I went there, Bowen, the Riverside Inn, 2 towns over, room 7. The clerk gave me a strange look when I asked. He checked out this morning. Left something for you. She handed me an envelope. My name again. Inside, one line written in a careful hand. He let her die. I saw it, but he wasn't alone. I didn't sleep. I just sat on the edge of the bed, reading it over and over. Not alone, meaning someone else was there. Someone still alive. Someone who'd been protecting the secret all along. The truth was close now, close enough to hurt. And I had a feeling the next time I went back to that farmhouse, it wouldn't just be ghosts waiting for me. The farmhouse looked smaller when I pulled up that night, smaller and darker, like the walls themselves were tired of holding secrets. The storm had passed hours ago, but the air still smelled of wet hay and electricity, that sharp metallic scent that hangs in the air after lightning has torn through a place. The porch light was on. I hadn't left it that way. For a minute, I sat there in the truck, engine idling, headlights sweeping across the yard. A curtain moved in the upstairs window, just a flutter. But it was enough. Someone was inside. I killed. The lights and the engine. The world went still. The front steps groaned under my boots, the sound swallowed by the wind. The door creaked open without resistance. The living room was how I'd left it. The half-empty glass of whiskey, the papers, the old tape deck still on the desk. But the air felt wrong, lived in. Then I saw it. Footprints. Hamud, faint, leading from the back door toward the stairs. I followed them, one hand on the banister, the other tight around the small flashlight I'd pulled from the glove box. Halfway up I heard it, a floorboard shifting. Slow. Careful. "Dad?" I called out. My voice came out lower than I expected. No answer. I reached the landing. The hallway stretched ahead, narrow, the wallpaper peeling like old skin. At the end, the door to my grandfather's room stood open, swaying slightly. Inside, the smell hit me first. Smoke, faint and sweet, like a candle snuffed out. Then the shape. A man, sitting in the chair by the window. "David?" I said. He turned. It was him. My uncle. Or half-uncle, I guess. The resemblance was faint, but there. The same jawline as my father. The same gray eyes, but rougher, harder. "I knew you'd come back," he said. His voice was steady, like he'd been rehearsing the line. "You shouldn't be here." He smiled. "Neither should you." He stood up slowly, one hand tucked in his jacket. "You've got his look," he said. "Your grandfather. Same stubborn eyes." "What do you want, David?" "What's owed?" "Grandpa left you nothing." He nodded. "That's the point." "I read his will. You weren't mentioned." "He couldn't. Not after what happened." I took a step closer. "You mean after my grandmother died?" His eyes flicked toward the window, then back to me. "She wasn't the only one who died that night." My stomach tightened. "What are you talking about?" He reached into his jacket. For a second I thought it was a gun, but it was a photo. Old, curled at the edges. He handed it to me. It was a baby. Dark hair. Wrapped in a blanket printed with blue horses. On the back, in faded ink, David, July 1984. "She wasn't supposed to have me," he said quietly. "Walter made her promise to give me up. He said I'd ruin what was left of the family. Said no one could know." "You're saying my grandfather was your father?" He nodded. "And your father was the reason my mother died." "Ruth was your mother?" His jaw clenched. "He called it an affair. She called it survival. Walter wanted to keep his good name, so she raised me out of town. But your grandmother found out. She was going to tell everyone." Pieces started to fall together like broken glass, reassembling itself. Jagged, painful, inevitable. "So you came back for revenge, huh?" I said. He smirked. "Revenge is such a small word. I came back to finish a story that man started. You tried to kill my father." "He killed first." I shook my head. "No, he didn't." David's expression darkened. "Then why did she die, Evan? Why did he hide it? Why did he erase her name from every story they told about this town?" "Because she was the wound," I wanted to say. "Because everyone decided the truth cost too much to live with." But before I could answer, his gaze shifted toward the desk. "You found it, didn't you?" "The letter?" He nodded. "The one Walter wrote. The one he thought would fix everything." I kept my face still. "Why?" "Because that letter isn't the truth. It's a confession to the wrong crime." He walked to the desk, running a hand along the old wood. "Your grandfather didn't hide the truth because of guilt. He hid it because of what he did after." "What do you mean?" He turned, eyes glinting. "He killed her, Evan. Your grandmother, not your father." The words hit like a slap. "You're lying." He smiled faintly. "Am I? Think about it. He had the motive, shame, fear, reputation. She was going to expose him. The child, me. He couldn't let that stand. So he made it look like suicide, then blamed your father to keep him quiet." "That's insane." "Is it?" He tilted his head. "Then why did he keep me alive?" My pulse thudded in my ears. "If that's true," I said slowly, "why would he leave me the letter?" "Because he wanted to control the story one last time. He knew you'd find it, knew you'd dig. That's what Reeds do. They can't stop digging graves, even after everyone's buried." He took a step closer. "But you can stop it, right here. Burn that letter. Pretend you never found me. Let them stay dead." "And if I don't?" He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Then you'll end up like them." For a moment, neither of us moved. The air felt thick enough to touch. Then headlights flared outside. Another car pulling in. David looked toward the window. "He followed you." "Who?" "Your father." Before I could react, the front door burst open downstairs. "Evan!" my father shouted. "Get away from him!" David drew a gun this time. "Put it down," I said. He aimed it toward the stairs. "He's not walking out again." I lunged forward, grabbing his wrist. The gun went off once, deafening, the flash lighting the room like lightning. The bullet tore through the ceiling. We struggled, the weapon slipping between us. Then a voice, my father's, shouting again. "Drop it, damn it!" Another shot. Then silence. When my ears stopped ringing, I looked down. The gun was on the floor. Smoke curled from the barrel. David was on his knees, clutching his shoulder. My father stood in the doorway, the old revolver shaking in his hand. He looked between us, eyes full of something I couldn't read. Fear, regret, relief. "Dad." He dropped the gun. It hit the floor with a dull thud. "I didn't come to kill him," he said. "I came to end it." He staggered against the wall. "I wanted to tell you everything, but I didn't know where to start." "Then start now," I said quietly. He sat down heavily on the bed. "He's right about one thing. he said, nodding toward David. Walter did kill her. Not with his hands. With his silence. What do you mean? He found her that night. Alive. Barely. He told me not to call for help. Said we had to make it look clean. No scandal, he said. So I did what he told me. I left the car running, and we walked away. When I came back, she was gone. His voice broke. He told me if I ever spoke of it, I'd lose everything. My name, my son. So I kept quiet. Until he cut me out. Until now. I couldn't tell if the tears in his eyes were truth or practice. Maybe both. David leaned against the wall, bleeding, pale. You both deserve each other, he muttered. One kills with lies, the other with silence. My father looked at me. Call the police. I hesitated. Evan, he said, softer now. Please. The sirens came 20 minutes later. They took David first, then my father, each in separate ambulances. The sheriff found me sitting on the porch steps, the rain starting again. Long night? He asked. I nodded. Generations long. He crouched beside me, hat in hand. We'll sort the rest out. You did what you had to. I don't even know what that was, I said quietly. He gave a tired smile. Survived. The house was empty again by dawn. The sun rose behind the barn, cutting through the mist like an old photograph developing. Inside, the letter still lay on the desk. I picked it up one last time. The ink had faded, but the words still burned. Until he tells the truth. I folded it carefully and slid it into my pocket. Then I walked outside and watched the light fill the fields. Maybe that was the truth. Not who killed who, but what silence does when it's handed down long enough. Maybe the Reed men didn't need justice anymore. Just an ending. But something in me knew it wasn't over yet. Because when I looked back at the porch, I saw it. A set of muddy footprints that didn't belong to me, my father, or David. Small ones, like a child's, leading straight up to the door. The footprints were smaller than my palm, pressed into the mud like someone had stepped there only moments before. The rain had stopped, but the ground still glistened, catching the sunrise in tiny mirrors. I followed them to the edge of the porch, where they simply ended. Inside, the house had that deep, exhausted silence of a place that's seen too much. The will, the letters, the smoke stains, every object felt like it was waiting for me to decide what part of the story would survive. I sat on the bottom stair and finally let myself feel what the last few weeks had taken. The confusion, the fear, the endless inheritance of someone else's lies. Then I heard the front door creak again. Sheriff Halbrook stepped in, hat tucked under his arm. "Morning," he said. "You holding up?" I nodded, though my voice didn't catch up right away. "We processed the scene," he continued. "David's stable. Your father's going to make it too. Said he wants to talk." "About what?" "Everything." He handed me a clear evidence bag. Inside was the photograph David had shown me. The baby in the blue horse blanket. "We found this under your grandfather's bed," Halbrook said. "There's something written behind the ink, like it was etched over another note. Thought you should see." I turned it under the light. Faint pencil lines revealed themselves. "Evan, when you're ready, find the safety box under the floorboards. Not all of me is gone. W." The floorboard was in the hallway, the one that always squeaked when I was a kid. Under it sat a tin box, rusted at the hinges. Inside, an old key, a folded letter, and a small audio cassette labeled Confession, July 1984. My hands shook as I placed it in the same tape deck I'd used for my grandmother's recording. The tape clicked, hissed, then my grandfather's voice filled the room, steady but cracked. "If this is found, I owe the truth. Ellen didn't take her own life. I found her in the garage after the fight. She'd passed out,
James was gone. I should have called for help, but I didn't. I thought it was mercy. I told myself it spared her pain. I buried that lie and punished my son instead, thinking if I erased him, I could erase myself. I couldn't. Then a long breath. Ruth helped me raise David. She kept the secret because she loved me once, and because she loved the boy more. If he ever comes home, tell him I'm sorry for all of it. The tape ended with a soft click. By the time I reached the hospital, my father was awake. Tubes, bandages, monitors, the whole sterile hum of machines filling in the silence. He turned when I entered. "You heard it, didn't you?" I nodded. He looked away. I used to hate him for cutting me out. Now I almost understand. "You don't need to," I said. "You just have to stop hiding behind what he did." He gave a small, tired laugh. "Reed men don't stop hiding. We just run out of places to do it." I pulled the letter from my pocket and set it on the tray beside him. "Then let this be the last one." He stared at it a long time before whispering, "Keep the house. Sell the store. I'm done with this name." The next week blurred by in statements, depositions, reporters. The sheriff called it a family dispute turned historical revelation. The town called it gossip. David pleaded guilty to aggravated assault, then asked to see me before he was transferred. He sat across the table, in the county jail, arm in a sling. "You got what you wanted," he said. "Truth." "I got pieces," I said. "Truth's just what's left when everyone else stops talking." He smirked. "Maybe, but now you know whose blood you carry." I met his eyes. "All of theirs. The good and the bad." He nodded once. "Then maybe you'll do better with it." Back at the farmhouse, I boxed up the papers, the recordings, the letters, everything that had built and broken the Reed name. I drove them to the river, the same one that cut through town like a scar. The current was slow, brown with silt. I opened the first box and let the pages drift out one by one. The ink bled fast, vanishing before it reached the bend. When the last page slipped away, I felt something unclench inside me. Not forgiveness, just space. Weeks later, I started fixing the house. New floorboards, fresh paint. I kept one thing from the attic. A single photo of my grandfather holding me as a baby, his expression unreadable. I framed it on the mantel, not as honor, but reminder. One night, as I locked up, I noticed something at the edge of the yard. Those same small footprints, pressed into the dirt again. But when I followed them this time, they led only to the old oak by the fence, where a stray kitten sat, pawing at a fallen branch. I laughed. First time in months. Maybe the house was finally breathing again. Before bed, I wrote one last letter. Not to my father or David, but to whoever came after me. If you find this, know that our name was built on silence, and silence is a kind of inheritance too. Break it. Love, Evan Reed. I folded it, slipped it into the same cedar-smelling envelope that started all of this, and placed it in the drawer. Maybe someone would find it decades from now and think it was just another mystery. Maybe they'd read it and decide not to repeat us. For once, that felt like enough. If this story moved you, subscribe for more real-life confessions and emotional journeys like this one.